Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Radhamohan, Jai Gurudev. Dandavats to all the chosen few on Gurudev's request. And by his mercy, we continue our reading of Manah Siksa by Raghunath Goswami with the nectar commentary by Anantadas Babaji, together with many others. We always start, and I think I always will start, by remembering the sweetness of the whole idea of a Manah Siksa. Who would begin to think about having a nice little conversation with your mind, calling your mind your friend, and trying to encourage your mind to cooperate, collaborate. In a way, every day when we're doing our bhajan and struggling to keep our attention focused, then in a way we're all making a Manah Siksa, lessons to the mind. Sometimes the lessons are a little bit strict. Stop that monkey mind, please. And sometimes the lessons are a little bit sweeter, like they are here with Raghunath. But the main starting point is that the mind is Krishna's subtle energy, located between the material energy, the Maya energy, the Maya Shakti, and the internal energy, which is pure soul, lies the subtle energy, which is a mix. So we are material beings, but we are jivas, so we are also inhabited by pure spiritual energy, the internal energy of the Antaraga Shakti. And in between these two is kind of a negotiator, which is the mind. The mind is a negotiator because it takes our material experiences. For example, I can smell the incense with my nose, or I can taste the prasad with my tongue, or I can hear your voices and see your faces. These are material inputs that come through light waves which vibrate the air, or particles through the air. They come through material sound waves and so on and so forth. But our mind translates them for us and makes them, in a way we don't understand very well, available to our spiritual perception. So in this very strange in-between existence we have as jivas, as material beings, nonetheless in possession of a soul, the mind plays the key role. The mind cannot perceive spiritual inputs. The mind can only perceive mental input, physical, material inputs. And yet we can have an experience of spiritual sensations through the mind. And the point we'd gotten to in some way in the last two shiksas, the last two teachings, was that we have to try to purify the mind, to clarify the mind, to clear away not only the material senses that come into the mind, the material perceptions that come from our material senses, but also the material mental issues that we get stuck with, the arguments we had with our boss, or the desire we have to go for a car ride, or the disappointment we might have with the grade we got on the last test at school. These are all subtle perceptions which are distracting us from the spiritual ones. So in a way, we have two projects, two tasks when we talk about purifying the mind. The one is to clear away material perceptions, so not focus on sight and sound and smell that comes from material world, but also to calm the mind, calm the movement of the mind in material thoughts, thoughts about our material world, thoughts about arguments and contradictions and conflicts in our material lives. So these two tasks together make up what the Raghunath Das Goswami is talking about when he's talking about making friends with your mind and using your mind as a pipeline to your spiritual experience, to your soul. We talked a little bit last time about what a lesson is and what it can mean to give a lesson. I think we probably said enough about that. Remember, I talked about the bucket theory of learning from material consciousness, where we fill up our bucket with intelligence, and then when we're full, then we're smart. In spiritual thinking, in spiritual experience, learning means realizing what's already present in our soul. So we don't need any more external knowledge. This has its role in our lives. We don't need a smart professor to tell us everything we don't know and try to fill our brains with that knowledge. We need a teacher who can guide us to what we already know. That's difficult enough. It's difficult enough to know that we already have the whole treasure chest of spiritual knowledge living in our soul. It's only covered by our material blockages and our egoism. It's hard enough to believe that. But once we realize that, then we can start to uncover the experiences that we already have in our spiritual consciousness. So that was last time. The basic principle behind it all is that the human soul, the soul of the jiva, just like the soul of every other jiva, is a little part of the soul of the divine. It's identical in quality, but it's different in quantity. So the soul, our soul, is exactly like the soul of God, only it's much, much, much smaller. So we talk about the sparks from a fire. If God is the fire, then our soul is the spark. Or sometimes we talk about the sun rays. If God is the sun, then the sun rays are our soul. But the point is that everything there is to know about everything in the real world is already lying asleep, for the most part asleep, in our souls. And the path to realization is not a path outward to some faraway God who's going to tell us, like a grumpy old professor, what we need to know. The path is inward, clearing away and revealing to us the things that we already know, because the soul of the divine has already been planted within us. Last time, then, we finished the second teaching, the second Shiksha. And then on Gurudev's request, we had a bit of a detour to the Adi Lila. Gurudev was very interested in us hearing about the three components of the divine, the three components of God, or the three, I guess we should say, aspects or qualities of God, which are, for the reasons I just said, also the three qualities of our soul, because we are a little part and parcel of the divine. And that's nice. It's always good to understand this, but it's particularly good because, as you'll see in a moment, this will help us to understand what is being said in the third Shiksha, the third teachings. To remind you, the three aspects of the divine are Brahman, so the impersonal truth, the reality, material reality of everything that is. In a bit more philosophical way, we can say being itself. The second is Paramatma, we translate that as super soul, which means that, just like I was saying a moment ago, a little bit of the soul of God is in us. So that little bit of soul is called Atma. And then the aggregate soul, the total soul of all souls, is called the super soul or the Param Atma. So this idea that a little bit of God is everywhere in us. So Brahman, impersonal God, everything there is, it's just the divine. And since we are part of everything that is, we are also part of the divine. Secondly, we are a little bit of the soul of God. We are Atma in the Paramatma. And then thirdly, and most importantly for Bhakti, is Bhagavan, what Srila Prabhupada made famous by translating the personality of Godhead. The part of God that has qualities very much like human qualities. And then I tried to suggest 5 different examples of these qualities, and maybe it's helpful for me to repeat them very quickly. The one was that God has personal relationships. So God has a personal relationship to devotees, to other gods, to other demigods, to sadhus, to acharyas, and so forth. So only by having personality can God have personal relations. So the fact that God is Paramatma and we're Atman doesn't mean we have a personal relationship. And the fact that God is Brahman, total reality, doesn't mean that we have a personal relationship. But in the very special conception of Bhagavan, God can be like a father to some, or can be like a child, or can be like a friend, or can be like a boy. All of things that we can relate to with our jiva souls. We can have a relation to that. We can feel what God feels in that sense. We can understand because we've had that experience, or we know someone who's like that. So the fact that God has a personal relationship or personal relationships with many is the strongest quality of the personality of God. And wherever there's a personal relationship, there's feeling. So because God is a personality, because God has personal relationships, that means that there's feeling flowing between God and the one, the soul, that God has a personal relation to. So this is the place where devotion happens, where love is flowing, where friendship is flowing. All of these emotions come through that personal connection, which is completely unique for impersonalists. So those who believe that God is impersonal, has no personality, or those who are Mayavedas, who think that God is only reality itself. So, and the second way that God has a personality is through his different, or her different qualities, the different ways the divine acts in different situations, like a sense of the good, a sense of the beautiful, a sense of justice, a sense of wisdom. So we can relate to these because we have these feelings, experiences in our own hearts. For that reason, once again, God appears as a personality. Thirdly, God has different forms in different contexts. God appears differently. We talk about murtis, the different forms. So not only does God appear in different avatars, different incarnations, like Ram, like Vishnu, like Shiva, and so on and so on. There are many, many. But we have different relations to these different manifestations. And so there's a personal relationship that we have to God. The fourth way that God has a personality is through the strange things that he does, the strange and wonderful things. I'm not making fun. through the Leelas, through his pastimes. The Lord does all sorts of sweet and wonderful and sometimes strange pastimes throughout his life. And in this way, teaches devotees, but above all, keeps a personal relationship with devotees. And finally, the fifth, and maybe it's the summary of all of them, is the emotional connection, the bond of devotion. God loves his devotees, and devotees express their understanding of God through devotion. So that was the focus of this detour through Adi Lila, the three types of the divine. The greatest of these is Bhagavan, the personality, and then we talked about these different ways that personality can be seen. So we move on. We move on to the third Siksa, the third teachings. And here, just to give you a tip, a clue about what's going to happen, there are two major themes here in this teaching. The one is what life is like in Vraj, and the other is what it means to serve Radha Mohan. The themes are a little bit separate, but they're also overlapping. So here is Babaji's translation of the third Shiksha. I'll just read the English. O mind, listen if you want to live in Vraj. If you want to live in Vraj with great love, birth after birth, and if you want to attain the service of the youthful couple of Vraj, Radha Krishna, then always lovingly remember and honor Svarup Damodar, Sri Rupa Goswami, and his devotees, as well as his elder brother, Sri Sanatana Goswami. So we continue the discussion about what it means to do devotional practice. What is devotional practice? And now really going into the deeper level by, in this Shiksa, going into the Braj Lila. So the way that Radha and Mohan are playing out their pastimes in the forest of Vrindavan. But let's get one point out of the way here before we continue. It's the point about birth after birth, being reborn birth after birth. This is a question of liberation, of moksha. So I'll repeat the translation again, slowly. O mind, if you want to live in Vraj, and this means in spiritual consciousness, with great love, and this means in the most complete love, the love of Krishna through the service of Radha, birth after birth, that is, in eternity. And if you want to attain the services of the youthful couple of Vraj, Radha Krishna, then always lovingly remember and honor these three, or all the devotees, the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then he names Svarup Damodar, Rupa Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami, and the other devotees. One very important point, like I said, is point about liberation. Because Rupa Goswami, Raghunath Goswami says, if you want to live in Braj in eternity, and eternity means that you maintain your spiritual form, you maintain your spiritual existence, you don't dissolve into God, into the divine, like the impersonalists would say. So the Maya Veda philosophers, the impersonalists, like the Buddhists, they say that liberation, the highest form of being we can take at the end of life, if we reach the end of our spiritual path, if we purify ourselves and are virtuous and carry out all the spiritual practices that are required, then we will reach liberation, moksha, which means that we become one with the divine. We dissolve into God like a sugar cube into a cup of tea. We're still there, but we dissolve, we disappear into the infinity of God, and all our experience ends. There's no more experience. There's no more personal experience. There's no more devotional experience. There's no more relation at all. This is the impersonalist conception. The bhakti conception is completely opposed to this, completely different. The bhakti perception says, quite reasonably, I think, well, if this service to Radha Mohan, to the divine couple, is so wonderful, why don't we keep it going forever? And that is what happens in the bhakti conception of liberation, moksha. So for bhakti or Gaudiya Vaishnavism, coming to the end of the spiritual path with a purified heart, a cleansed soul, fully realized and fully transcended in our consciousness, means that we leave the body, the soul leaves the body, and is transferred to Goloka Vrindavan. It's transferred to the Vrindavan forest, where this spiritual devotion goes on forever. And the happiness that we have there never ends. So, to contrast, in the impersonalist idea, conception, devotional service ends. We become one with God. In the personalist, in the bhakti conception, attachment to the spirit, the material body ends, but we continue our service as manjaris, as servants of Radha Dasi in Vrindavan Loka, Goloka, in the spiritual world. So that is what Raghunath is referring to. If we want to continue to do this service, which we all have great pleasure and satisfaction in, because it's the nature of our soul to serve, if we want to do that, well, the recipe is very simple, even if it's quite challenging. It's to remember always these devotees, these associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's to devote ourselves to them. It's to honor them and to follow in their footsteps. So there was Svarup Damodar, the very close associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There's Rupa Goswami, the chief, the number one of the 6 Goswamis. There's his elder brother, Sanatana Goswami, who is the number 2 of the Goswamis, I suppose. And then, of course, the one who's writing this for us, the one who's reading, whom we're reading, is Raghunath Das Goswami, who's actually the material, the biological nephew of these 2, Rupa and Sanatana. And he, in a way, is showing us more, in a more personal way, in a more passionate way, what it means to be a Raga Bhakta. So that is the story about impersonalism and personalism, impersonal philosophy, which seeks to merge with Brahman, with the impersonal God, and personal philosophies which wants more than Brahman, which wants to continue this loving devotional relationship, which is our very nature, forever and ever. Liberation for bhaktas is personal. Means liberation is the feelings continue to flow. The pleasure continues to flow. The spiritual pleasure continues to flow. And liberation means that it just goes on and on and on. To this conversation, which I end now, let me add a little footnote of Gurudev, which I find so sweet. He's repeated many times a comment about this point, and the question, why do the impersonalists want to give up their selves, their souls, and become part of the divine? why do the impersonalists seek impersonal liberation? And his answer is very, very wise. Gurudev's answer to his own question is, well, as impersonalists in life, they have been unable to satisfy their material desires. They thought that material pleasures were important, and found that the more they satisfied their material pleasures, the more the material pleasures increased. The material desires increased. So that in material consciousness, desires are ultimately never satisfied. We're always frustrated. There's never enough. There's never enough money. There's never enough good life. There's never enough food. There's never enough. The house is never big enough. The car is never fast enough or shiny enough. And so, says Gurudev, ultimately these poor impersonalists become tired, just materially fatigued. I can't take it anymore. This running, trying to get enough all through our lives. And they say, just let me dissolve into the divine. Let me become an impersonalist. Let all this consciousness disappear so that I don't have to chase after satisfaction anymore. Now to Babaji, who has a comment on this question of taking birth again and again. Anantadas Babaji comments, now the question arises, does a devotee have to take birth again and again? And he gives a more detailed answer, the same answer I gave it in a more detailed way. He says, the answer is, devotional practice is not the same as Gyan or yoga practice. So Gyan, this is the practice which involves the search for wisdom by learning. So many devotees aim at finding realization and finding enlightenment by collecting information, more knowledge. And this can take us very far. Learning, reading, listening can lift us very high in our spiritual practice. There's no question about this. But it cannot take us that last bit, cannot take us that last step, which transcends material learning and goes into spiritual realization. So we go back to the model of learning. Instead of filling up the bucket of the head with knowledge, we must turn our attention to the internal energy of our soul. So true realization is discovering the soul, discovering the Svarup, the spiritual identity. And Gyan, the search for wisdom in knowledge, cannot take us there. So this is why Babaji says it's not that. He also says, well, it's not yoga practice. So the idea of carrying out rituals, practices to do good things for others, for society, for oneself, for one's loved ones, this is also can raise us to a very high level, but it cannot let us take this final step, which is to direct our attention to our own Svarup, to our own identity, and find out that the realization of the divine is there. So the two, we could say, most famous or most popular paths towards realization, says Babaji, cannot take us there. Prabhupada often says the same thing, writes the same thing. And what's the alternative? Now I read Babaji again. The practice of bhakti is sweet, and its resultant perfection is also sweet. So the difference between reading all the books and doing all the good deeds, Gyan and yoga practice, is that bhakti has sweetness, madhurya. madhurya. And there's something that sweetness cannot, there's something in sweetness that Gyan and yoga cannot give us. And it's something that we cannot put into words, cannot put into books or into actions. It's something that lies in our hearts. Sweetness is not something. It's not substance. It's not content. It's not an idea. It's not a thought. It's the softness of thoughts. It's the softness of our experiences. It's the delicateness of our memories. So it's not about the thing itself that might be in our minds or it might be in our actions. It's how this knowledge, these actions have to them a very special quality, which is called sweetness, which allows them to be touched, which allows them to be relished, allows them to be enjoyed. This idea, this word sweetness can be applied to anything, as long as there's an experience there. We can talk about the sweetness of a what should I say? The sweetness of a sunset, or we can talk about the sweetness of a meal. We can talk about the sweetness of a story. We can even talk about the sweetness of something so material as a car, if we focus on the way that car touches gently our heart. So that it's not the car itself, the beauty, the color, the shine, the speed, all that, but the way it touches us with a kind of depth, a kind of indescribable experience. This is sweetness. Something that's very fragile and yet very strong. Something that's very vulnerable, but at the same time, the very foundation of our souls. So sweetness, this is really to meditate. I invite you to meditate on what sweetness is. And the sweetest of all in bhakti is, of course, conjugal love. Of all the different rasas, the different moods of love, there's a scale of 9. The highest, you might remember, is called Madhurya Ras. The flavor, the taste, the feeling of conjugal love. That kind of softness that can only be there between two souls that are extremely intimate with each other, who are so close that they can experience the strength of the fragility of their own emotions. That's why it's called sweetness. That's why it's called the mellow or the mood or the flavor of sweetness, because it's both extremely strong and extremely soft. And that's the state of the soul in its most pure sensation. Babaji continues. The experience of sadhana bhakti, bhava bhakti, and prem bhakti are to some extent included in each other. Here too, there are 9 different kinds of bhakti. We don't need to talk about them all. But among the most important ones are these 3, sadhana bhakti, bhav bhakti, and prem bhakti. And so Babaji wants to say something about how, hello again. So sadhana is kind of an intersection between the mind and the soul. So it's activities, spiritual activities that we carry out with a strong reliance, a strong basis on the mind. The mind makes us sit down and do a bhajan. The mind makes us go to temple. The mind carries us, helps us to remember the verses of the last song, the last prayer we're doing, and so on and so forth. Then next and higher is bhav bhakti. Bhav, of course, means mood or feeling or emotion. And this is a higher level of emotional evolution, where here it's the feelings that direct our attention. Still with the mind is still there, but we surrender more to our feelings and follow our feelings. It comes from long practice of sadhana, of the activities where the mind directs us, to the point where they become natural to us, they become habits in a way. And devotion in bhava bhakti becomes more natural, more spontaneous, because it's connecting to a deeper anchoring in our soul, deeper connection to the divine in our hearts, and therefore also deeper connection to stronger feelings like love and joy and compassion. And then, of course, as you might guess, Prem Bhakti is the highest. And here, we're still in our material beings, but we have a very purified relation to our soul. Our soul is very closely present. We have very pure love for the divine in our hearts. It's not clouded or polluted by thoughts. It's not clouded by or polluted by material sensations. All of these we've managed to master, like good Goswamis, master and put aside these distractions of our material consciousness. And then like I was saying at the beginning, all the different thoughts that we have, we've managed to calm these, our monkey minds, we put them aside. So in Prem Bhakti, it's a very deep and very continuous connection with our soul. And it leads us to experiences of transcendence, even while we're living in our material bodies. The best example of these is our dear Raghunathas Goswami. When we read in Vilapa Kusmanjari and other prayers in the Stavavali, we read about him meditating in material consciousness and his meditation becoming so pure in Prem Bhakti that he has visions of the spiritual world. He has visions of spiritual consciousness. And this is what Prem Bhakti corresponds to. So now Babaji continues and he says, the savor of sadhana bhakti is not less. So when we're in the lower forms of consciousness, we can savor, we can relish, but the spiritual purity is not at the maximum. Yeah. And Babaji goes on, especially the taste of living in Vraja is so great and so astonishing that the devotee desires to take birth there again and again, to relish it and the Lord who fulfills all of his devotees' desires. The Lord also thinks, let my devotee savor the nectar of living in Vraja. So we covered already the way that personal experience of the divine brings us to eternal life in Vraja. But here now, Babaji is explaining in a way how it comes as a kind of mercy from the Lord. Once we've purified our soul, once we've cleared away the rubbish in our minds, once we've cleared away all the action, the movement of our intelligence, then the Lord can see clearly our soul. Our soul is open and exposed, and even we could say vulnerable. And so the Lord welcomes us, is happy to see that we've reached this point and that we will be with Radha Mohan eternally in Vraja. Yeah, enough said. Babaji continues. The devotee humbly thinks that he doesn't have any devotion and prays as follows. So the devotee, many devotees like us who are frustrated or trying to find our way and having trouble or not going fast enough, this is what the devotee prays. And this is a prayer, from the Vishnu Purana that Babaji cites. It's a prayer called the Prahlada. It's a famous prayer in Hindu philosophy, in Hindu mythology. And Prahlada is a devotee of Vishnu in the Puranas. He's a pure devotee, a very clear devotee, and he's so pure that his father starts worrying. His father, in a way, gets jealous. His father becomes angry and wants the boy, Prahlada, to be devoted to his father and not to Vishnu. And there are lots of troubles and fights between the boy and the father, but the faith is strong, and the boy, Prahlada, continues his devotions towards Vishnu. So in a way, it's a story about how we, who are all weak in our devotion, all struggling to increase our devotion, even if our father tells us we're full of nonsense, we should continue our faith, continue to be brave, and carry on. So after all that introduction, here is the prayer. It's just one line. It's only part of the prayer. O Lord Achyuta, may I have unflinching devotion for you in all the thousands of births I may still have to take. So Prahlada says that even though his father's giving him trouble, and even if he doesn't find perfection in this life, he promises devotion to Vishnu through as many rebirths as it might take. And Prabhupada now explains, the devotee humbly thinks that he is so sinful that he will have to take many births more in the material world, in different species. But it doesn't matter to him, as long as he has devotion in his heart. So Babaji cites this as a lesson to us, if you like, that no matter how many births we might have to take, and I personally am sure that I'm going to become a Mungar Mandir monkey in my next birth, nonetheless, I should stay on course, says Babaji, that stay on the goal, stay focused on where I want to go. And as long as my devotional service is increasing, my relation to the divine is increasing, then the Lord will be pleased and liberation will come ever closer with every step. So now Babaji comments what Raghunath is actually saying in this verse. And he says this, Sri Raghunath Das speaks here about living in Vraj with love, birth after birth. How beautiful is the picture of living in Vraj with love. And he goes on, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami, and Sri Raghunathas Goswami, who showered themselves with tears of love while feeling anxious separation from their beloved deity, are the best examples of how to live in Vraj with love. Once again, the three are part of the same family. And it's a remark that I say because I can add because Gurudev often does. The three of them are linked very closely for another reason. So once again, Sanatana was the oldest of the two brothers. Rupa was the oldest of the two brothers. Sanatana next, and then Jiva Goswami was among them, was a nephew. I wonder if I said before that Raghunath was the nephew. It was Jiva that's the nephew. For Gurudev, and he's not alone, Rupa represents Abhideya, which means the method for arriving at our spiritual goal. So Gurudev, like many other acharyas, say, well, in order to study how to get there, how to do practice, how to do devotional service, we should read and study and follow Rupa Goswami. Number two, Sanatana Goswami is associated with sambandha, with connection. So when we want to learn and deepen our connection to the divine, we should meditate on and study Sanatana Das Goswami and his writings, his books. And then finally, Prayojan is the goal. And Raghunath is representing the goal, the final way that we want to be doing devotional service in its highest form. So what we read in Velapakus Manjari about Raghunath worshipping and then entering into devotional service in the Leela is, for many, the highest example of how to live, not how to theorize like the other Goswamis, but how to live that devotion. They wore, this is Babaji again, they wore only loincloths and chadas, shawls, and floated on the waves of the nectarian ocean of the love of the gopis. So these three were the highest. Raghunath Das Goswami was the highest of the three in terms of embodying this devotion, living out the devotion. Everything in Vraja reminded them so much of Radha and Krishna that they wandered all over Vrajavandara, lamenting and searching for their beloved deities. Now, Babaji quotes from the Srinivasacharya, who was a close associate of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and who wrote a very, very famous series of prayers called Nad Goswami Estatkam. And this is the prayer number 8. I just take the English translation. O Radhe, O goddess of Braj, O Lalite, O son of Nanda, where are you? Now I am in Vrajdam, the abode of your eternal pastimes. Where are you immersed in the ras of your pastimes, diffusing unlimited sweetnesses? Are your pastimes going on at the foot of a wish-yielding tree near Govardhan Hill, or are you enjoying on the bank of the Yamuna? When Babaji explains or comments, he says, in this way, the 6 Goswamis anxiously cried out for Radha and Madhava and wandered through Raj Mandala looking for them. So this prayer is an embodiment of the 6 Goswamis crying out for the access to Vrajdam. They want to be there. They want to join the pastimes, and so they're praying in this way. This is why Babaji cites this prayer. They're crying out to Radha and Mohan together. It's a very important thing to remember that the prayer, like so many prayers by Raghunath Das, are to Radha and Mohan together. This very verse from the 3rd Shiksha talks about Radha and Mohan. And this prayer talks about Radha and Mohan. Why is that important? Well, in bhakti practice, we don't pray to Radha, we don't pray to Mohan, we pray to Radha Mohan. We pray to their relation. We pray to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who was the embodiment of their relation. In other words, we don't need another opulent God. We don't need another four-handed Krishna. We don't need to replace the Krishna with Radha. We need to replace this idea of God the King with an idea of God as a loving relation. So what's special about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is that he shows that God is not one, God is the relation between two. The highest thing in the world is not Radha, is not Mohan, but it's Radha's love for Mohan. We worship Prem. We serve Prem. What does a Manjari do in Manjari Bhav? She does everything in order to make the Prem flow. She doesn't serve Radha alone, like a princess in a castle on a hillside. Certainly a Manjari doesn't serve Mohan alone. What a Manjari serves is Radha in her attempt to meet Mohan. Many people misunderstand that the goal is not to love Radha, even though we do love Radha. It's not to be loved by Radha, even though Radha does love us. Our goal is to serve the love of Radha and Mohan. We have one task, and that is to bring the lovers together so that Prem is there. Bring the lovers together so that Prem, which is the emotion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so that that becomes clear and flowing and the strongest. We don't need a new God like the old ones. We need a veneration of love itself. Radha's love, yes. For Mohan, yes. So we're all about Radha and Mohan. It's not a question of being loyal to them or not, but we're about them together and not separate. And to this then, Babaji says, I offer my obeisances unto these 6 Goswamis. And to show this mood, now Babaji is citing a song by Narottam Das Thakur called Partana Gitika. Partana Gitika, Song 25. Partana Gitika, Gita, you know, is the word that means songs, song. So Partana Gitika means songs of prayer, songs that pray. Here's the first, there's several verses. When will I become so attracted to Krishna that I will give up all sense enjoyment? Wear only a loincloth and a torn up chadar, and carry only a clay pot with me. When can I go to Nikunj of Vraja and make them my home? Very much like the prayers of Raghunath Das. And of course, Narottam Das, when he's writing Prema Bhakti Chandrika, he gives very similar kinds of prayers. In the essence, when can I take that position of Raghunath, so very close to spiritual consciousness that I can go into my spiritual consciousness and live these things? Give up sense enjoyment, wear only a loincloth like Raghunath Das did, only a chadar, and meditate on these things all day long. The prayer continues. When, Hari Hari, when will that great day be mine when I can wander around in Vrindavan, not caring about anything, eating only fruits and roots, at the end of the day. Again, very much like what Raghunath does. And so I suppose most of us will read this and say, well, I don't know, I like my 3 meals a day and my air conditioning and my nice warm clothes. And we think this way only because we're in material consciousness. And when, like Raghunath, we reach a higher level of consciousness, all these material concerns will disappear. We'll think of nothing else but spiritual matters. We'll only want to hear spiritual songs. We'll only want to hear spiritual music. We'll only want to hear about the pastimes. We'll only want to read the books that tell about these things. He continues, the prayer goes on. I will eagerly take a bath in the cool Yamuna water, and in great loving ecstasy, I will raise my arms and wander all over Vrindavan, crying out, Krishna! I will soothe my burning heart by seeing Radha and Krishna's meeting place, and I will roll around there in great loving ecstasy, crying out, where are you, O Radhe, Queen of my heart, O Lord Girivaradhari, where are you? So Girivaradhari is another name for Krishna. Or Radha, I guess. Giri, of course, is girl. Dari is the one who carries the best, and Vara means the best. So Giri Dara Giri Vara Dari is the girl with all the greatest qualities. So he's praying to be longing. That's what's a bit strange and sweet about this prayer. He says, when can I please start praying purely? So instead of praying from our material comforts, Narottam Das, just like Raghunath Das, wants to pray in a more pure way. So he prays to have the opportunity to be on the side of Radhakund or wandering around Braj and praying purely from his soul. This is what now Babaji explains. This is a sweet picture depicting how the devotee lives in Braj with anurag, deep love. According to the experience of the acharyas, this condition is even more relishable than directly meeting the Lord himself. So this is a quite remarkable line. We've heard this before in other contexts. I repeat, this is a sweet picture depicting how the devotee lives in Vraj with anurag, with deep love. According to the experience of the acharyas, this condition is even more relishable than directly meeting the Lord himself. So we mustn't think that the highest pleasure, the highest goal is to be together with Radha Mohan. The highest goal of bhakti is to long for that. Not to be there, not to end the journey, but to realize the journey as a goal. The journey itself is the goal. So in bhakti, this longing is the highest feeling. The longing which is deep love, anurag. We are never completely ending this longing. We mustn't think like many do, many of our brothers and sisters, that, once we get ourselves to Braj, then we'll be in the forest with Radha and Mohan, done, we're there. We can finish. No more longing, no more desiring, no more needing, no more relishing. No. Love in separation is the norm. It's not just a bad situation we hope to get over. Love in situation is what Radha lives every day, almost constantly. I say almost constantly because sometimes she's together with her Mohan, but almost all of her day is filled with longing. This is the highest state of the bhakta, to long. Not to have, not to be, but to long. If we had everything, it would be just like being in Brahma, dissolving into the absolute. There'd be nothing more to want for. There'd be no other experience to have. The experience of bhakti is the experience of desiring, not the experience of having. A very, very important point that comes up many times in our readings, but it's difficult to realize. Our model is Radha, and she's desiring all day long. She does nothing else. She's thinking about meeting up with Mohan. And the only reason she separates is so she can start desiring again. Desire is the norm, not unification. Now, Babaji again. The word saragam can also mean to live in Vraj together with other Raganuga devotees. So saragam is another way of saying love in attachment. But we're seeking Raganuga, love in longing. And this, Babaji says, in terms of Ragatmika devotion. He says, the devotion of Krishna's eternal associates in Vraj, the devotion of Krishna's internal associates, the ones we want to be, remember, in Vraj, is called Ragatmika Bhakti. And devotion in allegiance to them is called Raganuga Bhakti. And this you've heard many times, but we can remind it that the raga means passionate love. Anu means to follow continuously, to follow after. So Raganuga Bhakti is love that is flowing like a stream, endless stream. I'll come back to this word Ragatmika in a minute. It's very important too. So now a citation from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila. Devotion full of rag, deep love, passionate love, is called Ragatmika devotion. Any fortunate soul who becomes greedy for such devotion after hearing about it will follow the mood of the inhabitants of Raj without caring about scriptural injunctions or logical arguments. Such is the nature of Raganuga Bhakti. So Raganuga, we say, is spontaneous. It comes without any cause. We can't argue it into being. We can't command it into being. It just comes. It just comes without, as a surprise, without planning, without expectation. And this experience, the experience of this Raganuga mood, is the experience of a passion, of an attraction, of a desire, of a longing. Something's pulling us. That's what Raganuga means. Something pulls us. Something pulls our hearts. This is what love is, isn't it? I'm sitting here minding my own affairs, and something's pulling right out of the middle of my chest, like a rope is tied to it. I'm being pulled. It's attraction. There's energy there, like a magnet. There's energy there, pushing, pulling, dragging me out. dragging me towards someone else, dragging me towards some other place. This is what love is. Love isn't a place of peace. Love isn't a place of, oh, I've got everything, I don't need anything, my heart is full, I'm satisfied in all my senses. No, love is something saying, oh, I want. Take me there, take me away, take me to that thing, to that man, to that woman, to that soul that I want. So there's an energy there. Again, I want to change your mind in this argument. I want to change your mind about what love is. Love is not just like a cup of hot chocolate, which is so wonderful and perfect and satisfying. It gives us everything. No, love is pulling. Love is dissatisfying. It's saying, this, I want something else. I want something more. It's energy. This is what we call, you know it, Ladani Shakti, this energy that pulls us, that tugs on our hearts, that wants us to do, that wants us to move, that wants to seek out, wants us to find. And this kind of devotion is called Ragatmika. So now we get a citation from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, this theoretical book of Rupa Goswami. And the citation says, devotion which is fully manifest in the people of Braj is called Ragatmika. And those who follow in their footsteps are called Raganuga devotees. So Raganuga devotees, this we understand. We